Okay, so let's be honest.
Sure.
How many of us actually read all those legal documents before we sign them?
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like those cookie policies online. We just click accept, but the stakes are way higher when we were talking about leases, contracts, and stuff.
Right.
So today we are diving into all these articles and research about legal document review. You sent all this in because
Yeah.
you are getting ready to sign a lease
Okay.
on a new apartment. Congrats, by the way.
Thank you.
But before you sign, and you want to make sure you understand what you're actually agreeing to.
Yeah, that's a smart move. It's really easy to get caught up in that excitement
Oh boy.
of a new place and just kind of skim those documents.
Exactly. So in this deep dive, we're going to give you the knowledge to be able to spot any potential problems in your lease,
Okay.
like hidden fees or tricky clauses about repairs, things like that.
Yeah.
We're going to help you sign with confidence and know that you've got all your bases covered.
I think a lot of people think that legal document review is only for businesses or for like high-profile cases, but it can be really helpful in everyday situations.
Right. It's not just about avoiding lawsuits or anything. It's
Yeah.
also just about understanding your rights
Yeah.
and obligations.
Exactly.
Speaking of real-life examples,
Yeah.
one of the articles you sent in
Okay.
tells this story of Sarah, who almost got hit with some unexpected costs because of her lease.
What happened there?
So Sarah was ready to sign a lease for what she thought was like her dream apartment. But luckily, she had it reviewed by Legalshield attorneys first.
Oh, good.
And it turns out the lease had some unusual clauses buried in the fine print,
Like what?
waiving her right to dispute certain fees
Oh, wow.
and accepting responsibility
Huh.
for excessive wear and tear beyond what's considered normal
Yeah.
for a renter. These aren't typical renter responsibilities.
Yeah.
So without that review, she could have been stuck
Yeah.
with all these extra
Yeah.
expenses.
She wasn't prepared for it. Exactly. And that's where services like Legalshield can really shine.
Okay.
The article explains that Sarah just uploaded her lease through their app and she got a review within 24 hours.
Wow, so convenience and speed,
Yeah.
which is so important when you're moving. But did they just point out the problems, or did they actually help her figure out?
They actually helped her understand what each clause meant,
Okay.
avoiding confusing legal jargon. And they suggested some specific edits that she could request from the landlord to make the lease more favorable.
That's a game changer. So it's not just identifying red flags.
Yeah.
It's about having someone on your side
Yeah.
who can help you navigate the whole process
Yeah.
and potentially negotiate better terms.
Having an attorney explain those dense legal terms can
Yeah.
be so empowering and lets you make an informed decision and understand the potential implications before you commit.
It makes you realize how often we sign things without actually understanding what we're agreeing to. This whole deep dive
Yeah.
is making me rethink every online form I've ever filled out. But beyond leases,
Yeah.
where else
Yeah.
can legal document review be helpful?
Well, think about employment contracts. They often have clauses
Yeah.
about non-compete agreements or intellectual property rights. Those are things
Right.
that people don't always think about, but they can have really big implications for your career.
That's true. And it's not just big life events like jobs or apartments.
Yeah.
It's things like gym memberships
Well,
or even those free trials online. They can come with tricky cancellation policies or hidden fees that you might miss.
you're exactly right. Those seemingly harmless agreements can sometimes lock you in longer than you meant to or lead to unexpected charges. A quick review can help you avoid those surprises and make sure you're fully aware of the commitment that you're making.
So this is about more than just avoiding a legal headache. It's about being an informed consumer and understanding your rights in any situation
Yeah.
involving a contract or an agreement.
Yeah.
Why do you think so many people?
I think skip this step and just sign
Yeah.
without a second thought. I think it's partly because of the perception that legal services are expensive and only for complex issues. But the reality is resources like Legalshield are making legal help more accessible and affordable than ever.
That's a great point. Plus, there's this idea that legal stuff is just too complicated for the average person to understand.
Right.
But doesn't understanding your rights actually make you?
It does. A more effective negotiator, even in everyday situations, absolutely. When you understand the terms and clauses, you can confidently ask questions, request changes, and make sure that the agreement reflects what you actually want. It shifts the power dynamic and empowers you to be an active participant rather than just a passive signatory.
This is already making me feel more prepared for when I review my lease agreement. But for someone who's completely new to this, where do you even begin?
I would say start by familiarizing yourself with some common legal terms and concepts. There are a lot of online resources and even videos that can help you understand basic contract law and legal terminology.
So it's about doing some homework and getting comfortable with the basics. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But let's say you're looking at a document and something just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
When is it crucial?
If you're dealing with a complex or high-value contract, or if you have any doubts or concerns about the terms of a document, it's always best to err on the side of caution and seek professional legal advice.
Okay. Yeah, it's like that saying, measure twice, cut once.
Yeah.
It's better to invest a little time up front to avoid bigger problems down the road. Speaking of investing time, I remember when I was younger, I used to just sign things without a second thought.
Yeah.
It felt like those documents were written in some secret code.
Yeah.
I bet a lot of people feel that way about legal jargon.
It's true. Legal language can be really intimidating, but part of what makes legal document review so empowering is that you start to demystify it. Instead of being overwhelmed, you can start to recognize common terms and understand how they affect your rights and obligations.
So it's like learning a new language.
Right.
But this language can help you protect yourself and your interests.
Exactly.
Are there any specific terms or clauses that you often see in?
Absolutely. Everyday contracts that people should watch out for. So for example, boilerplate clauses. These are standardized sections that you see in many contracts, and they often deal with things like governing law or dispute resolution. People tend to skim over these, but they can have significant implications.
Interesting. So even though they seem standard, it's still important to understand how they apply to your situation.
Exactly.
What about what's a severability clause?
A severability clause states that if one part of the contract is found to be invalid, the rest of the agreement still holds. It protects the overall integrity of the contract.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like a safety net in case one part of the agreement falls through. You know, thinking about the bigger picture here, it seems like so many of these contracts are written in a way that favors the company.
Or the party with more power. That's a really astute observation.
Is there any way to level the playing field?
That's where understanding your rights and being willing to negotiate comes in. It's not about being adversarial. It's about advocating for yourself and making sure that the agreement is fair and mutually beneficial.
That brings me back to something you said before about negotiation. I think a lot of people, myself included, feel intimidated by the idea of negotiating, especially when it comes to legal matters. Any tips?
One thing for approaching negotiation effectively. One thing that can help is to shift your mindset. Don't view negotiation as a battle, but rather as a collaborative process where both parties are trying to find a solution that works for them.
So finding common ground and a win-win.
Yeah.
But how do you actually do that when you're dealing with someone who might have more experience or leverage?
Preparation is key. Before you enter any negotiation, you need to define your goals and your priorities. What are your must-haves? What are you willing to compromise on? Having that clarity will give you a strong foundation.
So it's like creating a game plan, knowing what you want and where your boundaries are. But what about the actual negotiation itself?
Active listening is crucial. Really hear what the other party is saying. Try to understand their perspective. This can help you identify areas where you might agree or compromise.
So even though it's a negotiation, it's also about building understanding and finding common ground. I like that. And don't be afraid to ask questions. If something's unclear, ask for clarification. It's better to address confusion right away than later on.
Exactly.
But being a detective, gathering all the info to make informed decisions. This is making me realize that negotiation isn't just some aggressive tactic. It's a skill. that you can use in all kinds of situations, not just legal ones.
You're right. These skills are transferable to so many areas of life, whether you're negotiating a salary, a business deal, or even dividing chores with your roommates. Clear communication and a willingness to compromise can go a long way.
So true. Okay, so before we move on, I gotta ask, have you ever reviewed a document and found something like truly shocking or outrageous?
I've definitely seen some questionable clauses in my time.
Like what?
I remember one case where a company tried to include a clause that basically absolved them of any responsibility for any harm caused by their product, even if it was due to their own negligence.
Oh my God.
A classic example of trying to unfairly shift the risk onto the consumer.
That's outrageous. It makes you wonder how often those kinds of clauses just slip through the cracks.
It happens more often than you might think. That's why it's important to educate ourselves about our rights and to be vigilant about reading. Understanding the terms of any agreement before we sign.
It's like that saying, forewarned is forearmed. The more we know,
Exactly.
the better we can protect ourselves.
Yeah.
Speaking of knowledge, are there any resources or websites?
There are that you recommend for people who want to learn more about contract law or legal terminology. The Legal Information Institute at Cornell Law School provides a ton of free legal info, including plain language explanations of legal concepts. And you can also access legal statutes and case law.
It's a great tip. It's amazing how much info is available online nowadays. But I imagine it can be a little overwhelming. Try to sort through it all. How do you find?
It's important. Reliable legal resources online. It's important to be discerning. Stick to reputable sources like government websites, school resources, or well-established legal organizations. Be wary of websites that promise easy solutions or guaranteed outcomes. The law is complex, and every situation is different.
So do your due diligence. Check the credentials of any legal resource, just like you would with any other source of information. Okay, so before we move on, I have a question that's been on my mind of this whole deep dive. We've talked a lot about understanding your rights and being an informed consumer. But what about the emotional side of this? Legal matters can be so stressful.
And anxiety-inducing. You're absolutely right. Legal matters can be very stressful, especially if you're facing a dispute or you're not sure about your rights. One thing that can help is to focus on what you can control. Gather info, seek guidance from experts, and take proactive steps to address the situation. Taking action can help you feel less overwhelmed and more empowered.
That's a good point. It's like going from feeling helpless to feeling proactive. What if you've done all that and you're still feeling anxious?
Don't be afraid to seek support. Talk to friends or family about what you're going through, or consider talking to a therapist or a counselor if you need help. Managing stress and anxiety, it's important to take care of yourself mentally and emotionally throughout the whole process.
It's a good reminder that it's okay to ask for help and that taking care of yourself is so important, especially when you're dealing with stressful situations. Okay, so before we get to our final thoughts, I want to touch on something we briefly mentioned, technology and its impact on legal services. It seems like more and more. Online legal resources are popping up all the time. How do you see technology changing the legal landscape?
Technology is already having a big impact on the legal profession. Online legal resources, virtual consultations, even AI-powered little tools are becoming more common. This makes legal services more accessible and affordable for a lot of people.
That's exciting, it sounds like. Technology could really democratize access to legal services.
I hope so. That's what we've been talking about this whole episode.
But are there any downsides or risks to this shift toward online legal resources?
It's important to remember that not all online legal resources are created equal. Like with any online information, it's important to evaluate the source, make sure it's credible, and be wary of websites that promise quick fixes or guaranteed outcomes. The law is complex, and every situation is unique.
So be a savvy consumer, even in the digital legal world. And while technology can be a great tool for accessing legal info,
and service
it's not a substitute for personalized
legal advice
from a qualified attorney.
That's a great point to keep in mind. Okay, so before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to come back to our listener. And the reason they send in all these sources,
Okay.
they're about to sign a lease for a new apartment, and they want to be fully informed and protected. What is your final advice for them as they start? First of all, this exciting new chapter. First of all, congratulations on the new apartment. It's such an exciting time. And it's great that you're taking the time to learn about your rights and responsibilities as a tenant. As you review your lease, remember the tips that we talked about. Pay close attention.
Let's recap to the key terms and clauses.
Yeah.
What should our listener?
So things like be looking out for the length of the lease, the rent amount, the security deposit, and any rules about repairs, maintenance, and utilities. Don't be afraid to ask questions or to get clarification on anything that's unclear or seems unfair. Remember, this is your home, and you have the right to understand and agree to the terms before you sign.
Those are great reminders. Beyond just understanding the terms, what can our listener do to negotiate?
Don't be afraid and advocate for themselves. Don't be afraid to propose changes or request amendments to the lease agreement. If there's anything you're not happy with, say something. Let's see if you can negotiate a more favorable term. Landlords aren't always willing to make changes, but it never hurts to ask and advocate for your needs.
So remember, you have a voice in this process. And you deserve to feel comfortable and protected
in your new home.
If you hit any roadblocks or you're not sure what to do, don't hesitate to talk to a lawyer who specializes in tenant law. They can give you advice and help you navigate the lease agreement and make sure your rights are protected. It sounds like having an expert on your side can give you a lot of peace of mind.
Absolutely, especially when you're making such a big decision.
Okay. Any final words of wisdom?
Moving for our listener as they go on this exciting journey. Moving into a new apartment is a wonderful experience. It's full of possibilities and new beginnings. By being informed, proactive, and assertive, you can make sure this new chapter starts off on the right foot. Enjoy your new home.
That's such a positive and encouraging note to end on.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. I feel like I've learned so much about navigating the world of legal documents. And I'm sure our listener has too.
I hope so.
But before we go, I want to leave our listener with one final thought. So we've been talking about how to think about all these legal documents, leases and contracts, with a more critical eye. But how can we make the whole system less intimidating and more user-friendly?
That's a really important question. I think a lot of people feel like the legal system is this big, mysterious thing that they just don't get.
It feels like you need a law degree just to understand basic legal documents. How do we fix that?
I think one key area is education.
Okay.
We need to start teaching people about their basic legal rights and responsibilities from a young age, integrating legal literacy into school curriculums. Would go a long way.
I love that idea. It's like giving everyone a toolkit for dealing with the legal world, whether it's signing a lease or dealing with a consumer issue, or even just understanding your rights in everyday situations.
And beyond education, we also need to make legal info more accessible and user-friendly. I mean, there are some good resources out there already, but we have to keep innovating and find better ways to present this info in a way that's engaging and easy to understand.
It's like we need a legal version of those. Explain it. Like I'm 5 videos that break things down into bite-sized pieces that anyone can understand.
We got to move away from that stuffy, jargon-filled language of traditional legal documents and find ways to make the law relatable and relevant to people's everyday lives.
So it's about meeting people where they are and using language that they're comfortable with. Okay, so before we wrap up, I want to talk about something you mentioned before, the emotional side of legal matters. I mean, we've talked about practical tips and strategies, but let's be real. Legal issues can be...
You're right, so stressful and emotionally draining. Legal matters often involve personal stakes, financial consequences, and then just a general sense of uncertainty, and that can definitely take a toll on our emotional well-being. It's important to recognize that and to prioritize self-care throughout the process.
Beyond seeking legal advice, what are some ways people can take care of themselves emotionally while they're dealing with these changes.
It's different for everyone, but some helpful things include practicing mindfulness or meditation, staying connected with friends and family, and doing activities that bring you joy and help you relax. It's about finding healthy coping mechanisms to deal with stress and to stay balanced during a tough time.
It's a reminder that we're human. We're not robots. We're going through something, and it's okay to admit that it's affecting us emotionally and to ask for help.
And it's also important to remember that you're not alone. A lot of people deal with legal challenges at some point. Talking to people who've been through something similar can be really helpful.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening. I feel like I have a new perspective now on approaching legal documents and navigating the legal system.
Great.
But before we go, I want to leave our listener with one final thought.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about being informed and being proactive, but I think it's equally important to be your own advocate.
I agree. No one knows your situation or your needs better than you do. So don't be afraid to ask questions or to challenge assumptions or to speak up for yourself. Being involved in the process can really make a difference in the outcome.
That's a great message. It's about taking control of your legal situation and making sure that your voice is heard. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your knowledge.
It was my pleasure.
I know our listener feel a lot more ready now to tackle their lease.
I hope so.
And any other legal documents that come their way.
Remember, knowledge is power. And by staying informed and knowing your rights, you can navigate the legal world with confidence and get the best possible outcome.
That's the perfect way to wrap things up. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into legal documents. We hope you found it informative and helpful. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay empowered.